Welcome to Fantasy Audiobook. You call this a D-level ability. Chapter 31. The rising energy quickly enveloped the area circled by the four yellow symbols. A second later, the sound of the wolf howling disappeared in front of Shu Yi. There was silence on the playground, and the breeze seemed to hide everything. The world in the mirror is the Jubao from before. Shu Yi's expression changed slightly, and he immediately stretched out his hand to touch. But his palm was blocked by a transparent barrier. Looking back, the surroundings were still surrounded by black energy. Even though Ganglang has been sent to the mirror world, its abilities are still shrouded in the surroundings. Shu Yi's expression changed one after another, and finally he took a deep look in front of him and turned away. The precious time that Fang Xin bought for them cannot be wasted. He wanted to see for himself if there was a way to crack the Colosseum and allow everyone in the school to successfully leave. The wind blows. The playground in the mirror world, like the real world, is full of traces of destruction by wolves. But in this world at this moment, except for Fang Xin and Gang Lang, there is no one else. Woo! The black fur of the wolf kept dancing in the breeze, and he let out a low growl. But there was a bit of disdain in its eyes, and it didn't think that the woman in front of it could stop it. Fang Xin also noticed at this moment that the explosion caused by his previous use of ability did not seem to cause any harm to the wolf. Even though she and Gang Lang were both in the rock realm, the gap in actual combat power was clearly there. Call. Fang Xin gently pushed her bangs away from her eyes, took a long breath, took out a bubble gum from her pocket, and put it in her mouth. Half a second later, he skillfully blew a bubble out of the air. Snapped. The bubble burst softly, and Fang Xin looked helplessly forward. I don't know if I will have a chance to chew bubble gum in the future. Boom. Ganglang's right foot was on the ground, like a vicious dog that swallowed stars and the moon, exuding a terrifying sense of oppression all over his body. Every time that huge body steps on the ground, it can stir up a flow of air, blowing the fake lawn of the playground continuously. Seen from a distance, its body, nearly 3 meters tall, looks like a mobile house. Now that I think about it, there are still a lot of things I haven't had time to do. Fang Xin was chewing bubble gum and mumbling to himself. I want to go south and see the sea. I promised before that I would take Xiaoyu to the amusement park with me. There is also the hot pot in Shucheng. I have long wanted to eat it. It seems like I haven't had a day off for a long time since I became a hunter. They have been teasing me for not having a relationship before, and they have never had the chance to try it. She scratched her hair in annoyance and vented as if complaining, "Oh, being a hunter is really hard work. I have to get up at 6 o'clock every day to train. I usually don't even have a weekend off. After performing one task, it won't take long before I have to perform the next task. If this continues, I always feel like I'm going to be 10 years older." Gang Lang dragged his paws irritably and stared at Fang Xin closely, as if he had lost his patience. Fang Xin noticed this, finally took a deep breath with his eyes closed, and took out a strange-shaped stone from his arms. It seemed to be smelted from some kind of special metal, and it was shaped like a 5-pointed star, which she could hold in her palm with her 5 fingers. She looked at Gang Lang, smiled slightly, and said calmly, "But being able to become a hunter has been my dream since I was a child. I can't fall here easily. And I also want to prove to that boy that the Void Hunter is not who he says he is." A strong wind blew suddenly, blowing a leaf, and it happened to be between her and the wolf. The leaves fluttered gently and fell to the ground. In an instant, one person and one wolf started moving almost at the same time. The Ganglang's powerful claws were like the wind, and it quickly struck Fang Xin. The wind from its claws turned 5 ravines on the ground. Red energy exploded on Fang Xin's body. She jumped to dodge the Ganglang's attack and came directly above the virtual beast. Her right hand was wrapped in special metal and she pressed hard on its back. Her face was actually filled with a crazy smile at this moment. "Do you know, in addition to the material of the object, my ability will also increase its power based on distance." The crimson light began to flicker brightly in her palm, shining like the sun. At this moment, Gang Lang sensed extreme danger, let out a low roar, and began to twist around wildly, trying to throw Fang Xin off his back. But Fang Xin firmly grasped the hair on its back and remained motionless, letting the light in his palm keep lighting up. "It's not Christmas today, but Merry Christmas." Brother Yi. When Wang Peng saw Shu Yi appearing from the direction of the playground, his eyes suddenly lit up and he rushed forward, shouting. His voice was excited and full of worry for Shu Yi. Don't worry, I'm fine. Shu Yi said calmly, with a soft look in his eyes, and patted his shoulder. Shu Yi, Another figure approached. Liao Wei came to him again, with a complicated face. Half a second later, he suddenly bent down and said in a solemn voice, thank you. If it weren't for you, I might have already. Brother Yi has left. Wang Peng interrupted Liao Wei and looked at the stupid big man in front of him with helplessness. Liao Wei straightened up, his ears burning with embarrassment. Brother Yi didn't save you because he wanted your thanks. Wang Peng shook his head calmly and looked at Shu Yi's back. He just follows his heart, that's all. Shu didn't see Tang Xiaowen and Ni Xiaoyu among these. They seemed to have run in another direction and did not appear here. Faced with the ganglang's pursuit and interception, a group of students and teachers fled in all directions and were already distributed in every corner of the school. He didn't care about this, he just went straight to the edge of the Colosseum, covered his hands with energy, and touched it. Black energy flashed past, and he immediately withdrew his hand as if he was electrocuted, and the energy covering his palm was swallowed up almost instantly. Don't try. A teacher from the Academy of Awakeners, leaning against this barrier, half crouched on the ground, murmured. Colosseum is a domain law type ability. Unless there are void hunters above the mountain level here, we absolutely cannot destroy this realm in any form. He raised his head and glanced at Shu Yi, his eyes filled with despair. In the Colosseum, the strength, speed, and even defense of the wolf will increase by at least 30%. That little void hunter girl from the rock realm is definitely no match for it. She's going to die. After she dies, we will never be able to escape from this prison. We are finished. What did you just say? Shu Yi's expression changed slightly. He stared closely at the teacher from the Awakened Academy next to him, and asked urgently. You said that wolf's speed and strength will increase by 30%. Yes. The teacher scratched his head and whispered desperately, I specialize in studying ability data in the academy. Based on the data of awakened people who have appeared in the past and have the ability of Colosseum. The Colosseum in the rock realm has an increase of about 30%. Oops, that beast actually hit his own growth rate. Shu Yi's expression changed drastically. He turned his head and looked in the direction of the playground. Although Ganglang's speed and strength had increased after he used his abilities previously, according to Shu Yi's judgment, they had only increased by 10% at most. But if it is true as this teacher said, the power that this guy can increase is only 30%. This shows that Ganglang has been hiding something. Let me ask you, is there a big difference between void hunters and void beasts who are both in the rock realm? He knelt down and began to question the teacher without any politeness at all, as if questioning him. The teacher didn't care about his attitude and just murmured, the division of realms is only related to one's own energy. But in actual combat, due to its size, the void beast's strength and speed will far exceed those of awakened beings of the same realm. Unless there are some extremely powerful physical beings, or their own abilities are extremely destructive. Otherwise, it would be difficult for an awakened person of the same realm to fight a virtual beast alone. It is for this reason that the Void Hunters will divide the Void Hunting team, precisely for the purpose of cooperating with each other's abilities to hunt void beasts. That girl will definitely die. Shu Yi stood up with a gloomy expression, finally understanding the seriousness of the situation. Just now, Fang Xin showed a calm demeanor, and even seemed to have some back and forth with the Gang Wolf. But in fact, she must be able to sense the terror of Gang Lang. In addition, Ganglang was so cunning that he actually hid his increased power. If this happens, Fang Xin will definitely fall into the trap. In his mind, Fang Xin's fearless expression as he stood in front of him quickly emerged. Kid, watch out, I'll let you know what a real void hunter is. What a real hunter. What a fool. Shu Yi quickly stood up, and the remaining hesitation in his eyes instantly disappeared. Without saying a word, he turned around and ran towards the playground. After experiencing the scene 3 years ago, he did not want to see any tragedy happen before his eyes again. Hey, Brother Yi. Wang Peng noticed his movements, his face changed slightly, and he immediately shouted loudly. But Shu Yi's figure quickly disappeared from sight without any pause. The teacher who was squatting on the ground just now murmured and looked at Shuyi who was walking away, with deep shock and confusion in his eyes. Does this child want to die? Even the void hunters in the rock realm can't deal with the void beast. What can a high school student who has just awakened do? But for some reason, there was a ripple in his heart, as if driven by Shuyi's courage, he stood up from the ground tremblingly. Maybe, there's something I can do. Boom. The ponytail tied behind his head fell apart due to the violent impact. Fang Xin's figure flew out like a cannonball and crashed directly into the ground. The dirt on the playground was shattered by her body, splitting into spiderweb-like cracks. This guy actually hides his power. Fang Xin coughed up a large mouthful of blood, half of his body was stained red with blood, and his eyes flashed with deep shock. She could even feel that at least 3 of her ribs were broken. At this moment, her entire right arm was covered in blood and flesh, as if it had endured a violent explosion. It had become extremely charred and black, and was hanging weakly at her side. She climbed up from the ground with great reluctance, her whole body swaying, and a trace of unwillingness flashed in her eyes. Not far away, the roar of the wolf turned into sound waves and rushed over, and its huge body became scarred at this moment. Its back seemed to have been penetrated by a blast, with a bloodstain appearing, dyeing its hair red. But it is still full of vigor and vitality, with a little insidiousness and cunning shining in its wolf eyes. In order to inflict this fatal blow on Fang Xin, it deliberately hid its increased power, just for the blow just now. I didn't expect that an explosion at such a close range would cause so much damage to it. Fang Xin stood staggering on the spot, almost being knocked down by the sound waves. She looked ahead silently, with a wry smile on her lips, her chest rising and falling, and she was breathing heavily. It seems like I'm going to fall here. The feeling of unwillingness filled her chest, almost setting her on fire. I have obviously promised Senior that I will protect everyone here. Ganglang adjusted his body and began to rush towards her direction. She gritted her teeth and threw the red ore in her palm forward with her still intact left hand. Then, she snapped her fingers with her left hand unskillfully. The red ore suddenly exploded into a red mist in the air. This piece of red blood ore is her last weapon. The power caused by detonating it obviously caused Ganglang a lot of injuries. He let out a low roar and rolled his body backwards. Although it was injured by the explosion, it was still vigorous and fierce. However, the air wave caused by the violent explosion blew Fang Xin's already unstable figure directly to the ground. She got up from the ground again. Even though her legs were starting to shake at this moment, she still pursed her lips and looked forward. I said, I want to protect everyone here. I will never let you take another step forward. The hesitation in her eyes flashed, and she finally placed her palm on her chest. Crimson energy flashed across her palm. This is the final move of Christmas Gift Farewell Gift. Once activated, she can turn herself into the final bomb. Its power is 10 times that of ordinary bombs. As long as the distance is enough, this power is enough to blast through Ganglang's entire body. At this moment, a look of madness flashed in her eyes. Even if I give you this life, I will never let you leave here. Ganglang rolled up from the ground, with many scars appearing on his body. Its eyes showed anger, and it once again stepped on the ground and rushed towards Fang Xin. Fang Xin looked straight ahead, silently calculating the distance. She pressed her left index finger and thumb tightly together, ready to snap. Ganglang was not aware of this strangeness at all, and still rushed forward regardless. 8 meters, 7 meters, 6 meters. Fang Xin stared straight ahead, waiting for Ganglang to take the last meter, then she would activate her ability and die with him. But at this moment, a whisper suddenly sounded like it came from another world. Maybe this is it. Wow! The air shattered like a mirror, and harsh sounds spread in all directions. Ganglang suddenly stepped on the ground with all 4 legs and stopped quickly. Fang Xin also stopped moving and looked to one side in disbelief. Right in the middle of the 2 sides, Shuyi held a broken sword and smashed the mirror into pieces, and his figure suddenly appeared. He just stood in the gap, panting slightly from the intense running, but when he saw Fang Xin, he smiled. Yo, I'm here to save you. Quote ? At this moment, not only Fang Xin, but also Ganglang looked confused. They did not expect that someone would intervene in this battle. Why are you here? No, How did you get in? Fang Xin's expression changed several times, and he looked at the gap near the gap in disbelief. Get out of here quickly, it's not something you can handle. And, besides, you are going to unleash some kind of death for death trick, and you don't want to affect me, right? Shu Yi walked in from the gap without hesitation. Soon, the damaged mirror behind him was repaired at an extremely fast speed, and the place was sealed again. You know you still. Fang Xin looked at Shu Yi in disbelief as he stepped into the mirror world and stood in front of him. I want to apologize to you. Shu Yi looked forward quietly and said calmly, for some reasons, I have some prejudice against the group of hunters. I have always believed that most people in this world are sophisticated self-interested people. Even if they have extraordinary abilities, void hunters who protect the people under the guise of protecting the people are no exception in my opinion. Even after they gain status and fame, they will pay more attention to their own lives. The reason for fighting against the Void Beast and Void Demon is just to enhance one's status and reputation. Once they encounter danger, they will choose to save their lives as soon as possible. But I really didn't expect that you would fight to such an extent to protect the students of this school. His calm expression and words, combined with the cut-off sword in his hand, actually frightened Ganglang. It is cunning by nature, and even deliberately hides its increased power in order to kill with one blow. At this moment, Ganglang was rubbing his steps, looking at Shu Yi in front of him in confusion. For a moment, he did not attack directly, but instead observed carefully. As hunters, it is our duty to protect civilians. This is also my childhood dream, and I have worked hard for it until today. Fang Xin looked at Shu Yi's back and gritted his teeth. I want to prove to you that the Void Hunter is definitely not what you see. 3 years ago, the group of guys you met in Haicheng definitely cannot represent the majority of Void Hunters. She took a step forward and shouted, "Get out of my way. This is a battle between me and it, you have no reason to interfere. It seems that you have investigated me." Shu did not retreat, but continued to speak calmly. 3 years ago, by chance, I met a girl. She is lively and cheerful, with a simple personality. She is so naive that she thinks the world is full of sunshine, but she is hopelessly stupid. And this fool's dream is to become a void hunter. In the 3rd month after I met her, because we lost the bet, we went to Haicheng next door to watch an art exhibition. But what a coincidence, a virtual beast suddenly broke into the exhibition that day. Facing the terrifying virtual beast, everyone was running away. A dozen people were swallowed by the virtual beast in front of me. But she is the only one who keeps running among the crowd, helping those who are in trouble and unable to escape. Fang Xin stared blankly ahead and clenched his fists. These contents have never appeared in the data. It is precisely because of this that she can better understand the anger in Shu Yi's heart, and why there is such a big prejudice against hunters. Shu Yi looked calm and just continued to narrate. In the end, facing the approach of the virtual beast, she chose to push me out, and half of her body was bitten to pieces by the virtual beast. At this moment, several void hunters suddenly took action and killed the void beast. They have been hiding among the crowd, watching helplessly as the crowd was swallowed by the beast, but they did nothing. It wasn't until that idiot stepped forward and caused the virtual beast's movements to pause for a second that they took the opportunity to take action and kill the virtual beast. The reason for all this is just because they want to wait for the opportunity to kill the phantom beast and gain merit. They even do not hesitate to do so and watch the people they should protect being swallowed by the phantom beast. When he mentioned this memory, a flash of anger flashed in his eyes, but he quickly suppressed it. And the last thing that idiot said when he finally fell into my arms was, "Shu Yi, look, the way I looked just now, did I look like a hunter?" Fang Xin's body trembled slightly. His breathing became rapid, and a trace of intolerance and anger flashed in his eyes. She couldn't imagine that among the void hunters that she considered to be extremely noble, there would be such a selfish person. But Shu Yi's voice continued to come from in front of her. I never thought that the extremely noble hunter in her eyes was something worth pursuing. But I see a little bit of her in you. If she were still alive, she might do what you did today, stand up and stand in front of the people she wants to protect. Ganglang rubbed his claws more and more frequently, and impatience was already flashing in his eyes. It kept growling, its body was ready to go, and it had no patience to continue observing. "Get out of the way quickly, don't stay here." Fang Xin noticed Ganglang's movements, and his expression became more and more anxious. The only thing that can stop Ganglang now is her last parting gift. But Shu Yi stood in front of her, and she couldn't use this last trump card at all. I used to think that fools like you couldn't survive in this extremely dangerous world. But Shu Yi remained extremely calm, not at all panicked by Ganglang's actions. But maybe there should be more idiots like you in this world. He raised the broken sword in his hand and pointed it at the wolf far ahead, with a strong fighting spirit bursting out of his eyes. Energy poured into the hand and broke the sword, and a faint wave of energy emitted from the sword. At this moment, Fang Xin noticed the broken sword and showed surprise. Is this the fluctuation of Jubao? You used it to break into the mirror world. But soon, her expression changed slightly, and she shouted urgently, the broken sword in your hand is an incomplete Jubao, and it cannot exert its power at all. Get away quickly, you can't deal with that wolf. Ganglang roared, stopped observing, and finally flew towards Shu Yi. However, a white light enveloped the broken sword in Shu Yi's hand, and the light seemed to be repairing the other half of the sword, extending upwards. At the same time, an astonishing wave of energy rushed out from the broken sword. I forgot to tell you. Shu Yi held the sword in his hands with both hands. The turbulent airflow from the front blew his hair and clothes back quickly, revealing his calm but slightly crazy eyes. My ability is called Repair Hands. As long as the conditions are sufficient, even if the sky is broken, I can fix that too. One day ago, the world in the pot. This is. Hu Lao looked at the ancient bronze sword extending out of Shu Yi's hand in shock. He did not expect that Shu Yi could actually repair this ancient object. Not only that, the remaining energy in this ancient sword began to expand rapidly as it was being repaired, emitting violent energy fluctuations. As expected, Shu Yi's face turned slightly pale, and nearly 80% of the energy in his body was drained by this ancient sword. But his eyes were burning, and this action confirmed the suspicion in his heart. The characteristic of the repair hand is to repair incomplete into complete. Conceptually speaking, the incomplete Jubao naturally has the effect of being repaired into complete. Holding the ancient bronze sword in his hand, he could clearly feel the energy contained in the sword's body. Mr. Hu, I remember you mentioned that every Ju treasure contains a special ability, right? That's right. Hu Lao looked at the ancient bronze sword in surprise and nodded. These abilities are similar to those of the awakened ones, but they are not limited by the energy realm. The effect and strength of the ability are only related to Jubao itself. Then can you feel the effect of this ancient bronze sword? Yes. Hu Lao's expression became strange, and he looked directly at Shu Yi. But little friend, I have two things to remind you. The first thing is that this sword was once a fragment of some powerful Ju treasure like the Julie pot, but its origin has been almost completely damaged and cannot return to its peak state. Maybe holding it will cause you some unnecessary trouble. But even so, it can still perform well under your repair. Well, what about the second thing? Shu Yi nodded slightly, indicating that he could accept this matter. Well, Mr. Hu looked at the sword in Shu Yi's hand strangely, and slowly said, the second thing is. Facing the Ganglang flying toward him, Shu Yi stared intently, and the ancient bronze sword in his hand had been repaired. Although the sword was heavy, he was able to swing it normally after injecting energy into it. He quickly threw half a tile towards Ganglang's head with his left hand, and immediately started his repair hand. The other half of the tiles in the palm were immediately connected to the tiles in the air. The white thread transformed by the energy pulled Shu Yi quickly into the air. The D-level ability of repair hand actually showed a very miraculous effect in his hands. Fang Xin looked at Shu Yi's movements in disbelief, her beautiful eyes blinked, and she was shocked. Is this really a D-level ability, repair hand? Why is he so flexible in using it? According to common sense, most D-level abilities only have auxiliary functions, and few people can use them in battle as flexibly as Shu Yi. Ganglang's flying attack almost missed Shu Yi's body. Under the tug, Shu Yi quickly came into the air, and the tiles in his hands became complete again. Ganglang, on the other hand, spun around on the ground with its four legs with great flexibility, turned its head and spit out its breath towards Shu Yi. A blazing white energy beam erupted from its mouth and approached Shu Yi almost instantly. But Shu Yi couldn't dodge because he was in midair, and instead put himself in danger. Be careful. Fang Xin's heart seemed to be tightened at this moment. Looking at Xu Yi, who was about to be hit by his breath, he exclaimed. But Xu Yi had a smile on his face. He threw out the tiles in his palm at will, clenched the hilt of the sword with both hands, and swung it downwards with all his strength. Then, in Fang Xin's shocked eyes, Xu Yi actually held the sword in both hands and cut the breath from the middle. His body was pulled by gravity and fell back to the ground in a slash. The breath he cut turned into two shocks, which hit the building behind him and exploded countless rubbles. It actually cut off the breath. Fang Xin murmured, but his eyes were focused on the ancient bronze sword in Xu Yi's hand. This pattern, she observed the lines on the ancient bronze sword, and a picture she had seen in a textbook suddenly flashed in her mind. How can this be? Jubao, Gushao. Didn't this happen to be shattered by the virtual demon during the war 200 years ago? So this guy is called Ji Yu Shao. Xu Yi moved his ears slightly and smiled slightly when he heard Fang Xin's whisper. According to Hu Lao, this sword was once an extraordinary treasure. It is quite normal for it to be recorded in the data. He didn't pause after landing, he just put his feet up and unexpectedly flew towards Gang Lang. When Gang Lang saw his breath being cut off, his eyes showed shock and anger. Immediately, it saw Xu Yi, who was uncharacteristically rushing toward him. It suddenly felt as if it had been despised, and slapped away with its right palm like the wind. Its claws are wrapped with its own energy and are extremely hard. It has enough confidence to crush the human in front of it. Among the records in the history books, Fang Xin looked straight ahead and murmured. Ju Bao, Ji Yu Shao, the ability attached to it is the S-level ability, Xiao Duan. And the effect is, facing the ferocious beast's claws, Xu Yi's eyes moved slightly, and he slashed forward with his sword in both hands. Phew! Under Ganglang's horrified gaze, after its right claw touched Ji Yu Shao, it was cut off instantly like tofu being chopped by a kitchen knife, revealing an extremely smooth cut, and flew high. At the same time, Fang Xin finally whispered, "Nothing is indestructible, nothing is indestructible." Possessing the absolute power to break defenses. Roar! At the same time, Ganglang let out a deafening roar. The broken part of its claws spurted out blood like a fountain. Xu Yi, however, had sharp eyes and continued to rush forward without any pause. In front of Ji Yu Shao, there is no defense that he cannot break. Because of this, even if he holds the incomplete Ji Yu Shao in his hand, he can easily tear the mirror world apart and break into it. It was precisely because of this that the seemingly extremely hard wolf claws were chopped off by him like a melon or a vegetable. Ganglang's eyes shone with deep fear. Facing the sword that could cut off all things, it did not dare to attack with its body. Instead, it jumped on 3 legs and leapt backwards. Then, it flicked its wolf head, and 3 tiny black lights flew out of its mouth, forming an inverted triangle shape and rushing towards Xu Yi. Facing this sudden attack, Xu Yi's expression changed slightly. He judged almost instantly that he could not block all 3 attacks. In that case, his eyes were fixed, he immediately made a decision, and continued to rush forward without slowing down at all. Then stop blocking it. Phew! Xu Yi's shoulders were instantly pierced by the 2 black lights, and 2 bloody holes appeared. The black light directly below was cut off by him with Ji Yu Shao. He groaned, his body trembled slightly, but his speed did not slow down at all, and he continued to rush forward. The severe pain from his shoulders spread throughout his body, and blood gurgled out of it. But his movements didn't pause at all, he jumped up and slashed at Gang Lang with his sword. Gang Lang didn't seem to think that someone would rush in front of him in such a way. It showed an angry look, and the pain of the broken claw made it lose some of its rationality. It slapped Xu Yi's body with a swipe of its left claw. The claws covered Xu Yi's body and continued to approach. At this moment, Xu Yi seemed to have no time to turn his sword around to stop him. But his eyes were staring straight ahead, and then he actually threw a scabbard from his arms and threw it into the air. Anything that is recognized as one can be repaired. The repair hand was activated instantly, and he was forcibly driven by Ji Yu Shao in his hand, drawing a nearly 100-degree curve in the air and flying towards Gang Lang's head. Gang Lang's attack failed again, but Xu Yi also took advantage of this gap to be led by Ji Yu Shao in his hand and inserted into the scabbard. However, this scabbard was originally prepared for the broken sword, and its length could not accommodate the repaired Ji Yu Shao. Therefore, the scabbard was cut off by the blade almost instantly, split into 2 halves and fell to both sides. 5 seconds left. Shu Yi looked solemn, but he was counting the time in his heart. What Mr. Who said that day was still echoing in his mind. The second thing is, D-level abilities have an upper limit after all. Coupled with your current energy realm, it is barely a stone realm. This means that even if you can repair this ancient bronze sword into a complete Ju Bao, in a minute at most, the energy you attached will dissipate, and it will return to its incomplete appearance. And the energy in your body can only support you to restore it once in a short period of time. So you must not rely too much on it and cherish this minute. 55 seconds have passed since he restored Ji Yu Xiao. Shu Yi has been counting the time silently in his heart. After years of practice, this time will never deviate by half a second. It is precisely because of the tight time limit that he would rather take the attack and get close to the head of the wolf. Roar! Ganglang's entire body was filled with a sense of crisis, his hair stood on end, and he sensed extreme danger. It let out a roar, and the tail behind it swung like a whip and slapped Shu Yi on the body. Cough! Shu Yi vomited blood, his body lost balance, and he was shot out of the air, with a look of horror in his eyes. Oops, I was careless. There is a gap in all the secrets, and he didn't even consider that the wolf could still use its tail to attack. At this moment, his chest felt like being hit by a car. It was extremely dull, his brain was almost unconscious, and his body was flying to one side uncontrollably. 4 seconds left. He endured the severe pain, forcibly recalled his consciousness, barely adjusted his body shape, grabbed Ji Yu Xiao in his hand, and threw it towards Ganglang's head with all his strength. Ji Yu Xiao quickly shuttled through the air, heading towards Ganglang's head. 3 seconds. At this distance, the wolf's pupil shrank to the size of a needle tip, and it suddenly opened its mouth, and a beam of energy condensed in its mouth. 2 seconds. Cough! Shu Yi's body fell heavily from the air, and the impact of the fall aggravated his injuries, causing him to cough up blood again. But he rolled around on the ground and tried his best to raise his head and look forward. After seeing the energy light ball in Ganglang's mouth, his expression changed drastically, and a feeling of uneasiness spread throughout his body. At this distance, Ji Yu Xiao cannot completely cut off this attack, and will be knocked away by the energy impact. He grabbed the fake grass on the playground hard, with unwillingness in his eyes. There's only 1 second left, is it over here? Even though he has worked hard to this point, he still can't ignore the gap in the realm. Ji Yu Xiao was still flying forward quickly, but the attack in Ganglang's mouth had also been accumulated. There was a hint of viciousness in its eyes, and it had already made up its mind to tear the 2 humans into pieces after knocking the broken sword away. And at this critical moment, the 2 stones actually formed 2 red tracks in the air and inserted themselves between Ji Yu Xiao and Ganglang. Shu Yi quickly turned his head, only to see Fang Xin maintaining the posture of throwing things, his eyes flashing red, and he snapped his fingers with all his strength. Boom! A stone exploded in Ganglang's mouth, and surging energy waves rushed out, blasting away the energy light ball accumulated in the wolf's mouth. White smoke came out of Ganglang's mouth, and his body was bloody as if his chest had exploded. It looked frightened and angry, and glanced at Fang Xin with its peripheral vision. Its heart was filled with anger, and it wanted to bite this human woman into pieces. But the air wave that exploded at close range also swept Ji Yu Xiao up in the air, spinning and flying upside down, unable to continue falling. The joy that had just emerged from Shu Yi was suddenly extinguished as if cold water had been poured on him. But the next breath, the sound of snapping fingers came to his ears again. The second stone thrown by Fang Xin actually landed diagonally above where Ji Yu Xiao flew upside down. At this moment, under her detonation, the stones exploded, and Ji Yu Xiao was immediately swept up by the air wave of the explosion, spinning and slashing downwards at an even faster speed. Ganglang raised his head in disbelief. In the wolf's pupils, the ancient sword rotated rapidly and expanded rapidly in its pupils. This speed is enough in time. Shu Yi looked excited and clenched his fists. The fire of hope that had been extinguished before surged and burned again. And just then, the lavender crystal that had been buried on Ganglang's head suddenly flashed with a strange purple light. Purple light shone in the sky, almost dyeing the sky purple. Then, a violent energy fluctuation spurted out from the gem. Purple light converged on Gang Lang's head, vaguely turning into a human figure. Immediately afterwards, a wild laugh came from the figure's mouth. Ha 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 ha. Don't worry, by the time you guys arrive, I will have already recovered from my injuries and will slaughter everyone in these schools. If you don't care about your life, just chase after me, Mr. Captain. The sound came from far to near, as if it was approaching rapidly from a faraway place. And the figure quickly condensed, and a man in black clothes appeared out of thin air and stood above Ganglang's head. With a proud smile on his face, he looked around and observed the environment here. But soon, the sound of wind came to his ears. Look up. An ancient bronze sword spun and fell, slashing towards him at an extremely fast speed. What is this? The man's smile froze and his voice stopped abruptly. Next moment, in midair, flying high in the air was a wolf's head that was still staring at death, as well as a broken arm. Blood splatters. 10 minutes ago. A village in the west of the city, a world in the mirror. The black energy that spread all over the sky turned into a sphere and enveloped everything. Guo Yan and Sha Li were seriously injured. They both leaned on the ruins and panted slightly, looking ahead in disbelief. Is this the power of the mountain void demon? It's too terrifying. Guo Yan murmured, a trace of fear rising in his heart for no reason. Compared with those members of the Hunting Void team who have experienced hundreds of battles, it has only been 3 months since they joined the Hunting Void Team 5. This is the first time they have encountered a Mountain Realm Void Demon head-on. Are the rest of the hunting team fighting monsters like this on a daily basis? A trace of concentration appeared on Sha Li's cold face, but a deep unwillingness shone in his eyes. Just like Nightmare said, the abilities that she and Guo Yan are proud of cannot even be achieved by assistants in this battle, and even require seniors to distract themselves to protect them. Just when the two of them were in despair, a light blue light and shadow, like an aurora tearing through the darkness, suddenly came from the distance. I saw Cao Sha holding a light blue longsword, and the sword body turned into an extremely long sword light, which actually tore the black energy apart, allowing the moonlight to shine down again. Mirror world freezes time as it unfolds. Therefore, even though the real world is as bright as day, it is still late at night here. Cao Sha's eyes were calm, his figure was like the wind, the blue robe behind him was making a sound, and in a few seconds, he chopped up all the black energy around him. At this moment, the long sword in his hand was like a shining star, becoming the only focus in this world. It's over, Nightmare, Cao Sha roared angrily and slashed down the long sword in his hand. The night sky seemed to be torn apart, and a figure was forced out by him and fell directly to the ground. It was pointed by the sword and couldn't move. Ahem, this time, Nightmare could no longer maintain his previous calmness. The fierce collision of energy affected the injuries in his body, causing him to cough up a large mouthful of blood. As expected of Mr. Captain, Night Dyer wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. At this moment of life-threatening crisis, he still maintained that demeanor. He stood up gently, but Cao Sha's sword kept pointing at his head, slowly raising his body. At this moment, Cao Sha was also seriously injured, and the energy fluctuations on his body were weaker than before. But even so, he still looked resolute and stared at Night Dyer intently. This S-level ability, Sword Tomb, is indeed extraordinary. Nightmare's face turned pale, she smiled softly and looked at Cao Sha. Using its own energy to randomly summon different swords, there is a chance of summoning Jubao and ancient weapons. The sword in your hand is a very powerful treasure. It took me a lot of effort to summon this blue shadow. Cao Sha said calmly, but since you have successfully summoned it, there is only one end for you. Then you will be killed here by me. He held the blue shadow tightly in his hand, and the sword trailed a light blue trail, constantly floating in the air, but it never fell. Why don't you drop the sword? Nightmare smiled slightly, staring at Cao Sha. Are you worried that I used my ability on you without your knowledge? The smile on his face continued to expand in Cao Sha's eyes. The next moment, the figure in front of Cao Sha was in a trance, and turned into Guo Yan's frightened look. Senior, wake up, it's me. Don't kill me, that guy is behind you. The sword in Cao Sha's hand only hesitated for a moment before slashing down instantly. Phew. In front of him, Guo Yan's shoulder was slashed by the sword, and a mist of blood suddenly spattered out. He let out a low growl, but his face quickly changed, returning to the appearance of a night dyer. His shoulder was cut by Cao Sha's sword. Although he used energy to protect his body in time, he still suffered a wound. I didn't expect you to be able to cut down the sword without any hesitation. Nightmare's eyes became a little gloomy, and she looked at Cao Sha in disbelief. Aren't you worried that I have really used my ability on you, and the person you want to kill in front of you is your team member? That kid Guo Yan, although he is usually very careless, at this time, he will not beg me for mercy like you. Cao Sha pulled out the sword with force and whispered calmly. If it was really him, he would have taken the initiative to get himself injured, so that I could determine the true situation. The next sword won't cut it crookedly. After confirming that the person in front of him was Nightmare, Cao Sha no longer hesitated and swung the long sword in his hand to slash it down quickly. However, at this moment, his eyes were in a trance again. The surrounding scenery changed rapidly, as if appearing in a forest. In front of him were 4 people with serious injuries and missing limbs. Wearing the same blue robes as Cao Sha, they dragged their mutilated bodies and turned around with resentful expressions on their faces. Cao Sha, why did you abandon us? The moment he saw the 4 of them, Cao Sha felt as if he had been struck by lightning. His emotions, which had always been calm, suddenly boiled up. You bastard! Boom! The scene in front of him shattered instantly. A blue sword mark streaked through the blue shadow in Cao Sha's hand, and he slashed hard on the ground. Suddenly, the ground where his sword touched opened a long crack toward the front. Taking advantage of his pause, Night Dyer actually dodged and got to the other side. A weird smile appeared on his face and he laughed loudly. Sure enough, painful memories will always cause you weak humans to have emotional fluctuations. Enough with the boring games. I think my pet should have the situation under control at this moment. He slid his feet on the ground, stabilized his body, and looked at Cao Sha, who was rushing towards him with a face full of anger. However, he calmly took out a lavender gem from his arms and crushed it hard. A purple barrier immediately rose up and wrapped around his body. The blue shadow in Cao Sha's hand struck hard at the purple barrier, but was blocked and unable to move forward. This is Jubao Purple Influence Transformation. He spoke in shock, but he did not expect that in the hands of this virtual demon, there would be such a rare Jubao. But soon he thought of something, and his expression changed drastically. Could it be that the other piece of purple influence turn is on that ganglang? Night Dyer's body was wrapped in purple light, and this purple barrier began to become illusory and transparent at this moment, as if it was taking his body away from the mirror world. Quickly, leave the mirror world and rush to number 3 middle school. Fang Xin is in danger. Cao Sha turned to Guo Yan and shouted angrily at Xia Li, looking anxious as never before. Night Dyer looked at the angry and anxious Cao Sha and laughed loudly. Ha 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 ha, don't worry, by the time you guys arrive, I will have already recovered from my injuries and will slaughter everyone in these schools. If you don't care about your life, just chase after me, Mr. Captain. The sound gradually became distant, and Nightmare's figure disappeared directly under the guidance of this purple light. The scene in front of me changed rapidly. Night Dyer smiled and appeared in a new world. But the next moment, there was a sound of wind in his ears, and he quickly raised his head, and there was a cold light in front of him that was rapidly enlarging and falling rapidly. What is this? Nightmare's smile froze and her voice stopped abruptly. Phew! Dyer stared into the air in disbelief. The ancient bronze sword that was flying towards him was spinning and slashing down. His left arm wrapped in energy was touched by the sword blade, cut off like tofu, and flew high. And at his feet, the ganglang howled out its final cry, and the shouting suddenly stopped. The wolf's head flew up and fell to the ground together with his broken left arm. Only then did Nightmare finally see the scene in front of him clearly. Ah! The severe pain of his broken arm instantly spread through his body. He had always maintained a gentlemanly and calm demeanor, but finally he roared with a ferocious look on his face and blood splattered. The ganglang's huge body hit the ground heavily, and the Night Dyer on top of it fell to the ground, shaking the ground into a cloud of smoke and dust. And Ji Yu Xiao, who was spinning and slashing down, almost instantly transformed into the original broken sword as soon as it cut off the wolf's head, and then sank directly into the ground and inserted into it. Shu Yi and Fang Xin were confused, and their hearts skipped a beat when they saw the sudden figure. They tried their best and managed to kill Gang Lang. But I never expected that in this situation, someone would actually interfere and suddenly appear here. You, how dare you? Nightmare stumbled to the ground, her right arm covering the broken part of her left arm, using energy to block the wound to stop the bleeding. Her entire face had become extremely distorted due to pain. Even the injuries sustained during the battle with the Huxu team in the virtual realm were not as serious as at this moment. Fang Xin noticed the aura fluctuations on Nighty's body and the pitch-black gem between his eyebrows. His face immediately changed and he exclaimed in disbelief, "Is this the Void Demon? How come he is here? Where are Senior and the others?" At the same time, a burst of noise suddenly came from the headphones she was wearing, and then Cao Shao's urgent voice sounded from it. "Fang Xin, that virtual demon used purple influence transfer and it will most likely go to your side. We must hold on. As long as we hold on for 10 minutes, we can." Snapped. A black light shot from a distance and instantly shattered the headphones in Fang Xin's ears. Nightmare's eyes flashed with extreme anger, and he gently lowered his right index finger, and the energy of the mountain realm rose into the sky. It was as if an overwhelming momentum was coming. Both Fang Xin and Shu Yi felt their shoulders sink at this moment, as if they were facing a wild beast. Shu Yi's heart sank, and he staggered up from the ground. The joy in his heart of killing Ganglang had long since disappeared. When one wave doesn't subside, another wave arises again. His chest was heaving violently, and his body was a little unstable. The impact caused by the slap from Ganglang just now caused great damage to him. The Ganglang was actually killed by you. Night Dyer groaned in anger and walked forward step by step. With every step he took, Shu Yi felt the pressure on his shoulders become heavier. But suddenly, there was a flash of light in his eyes, which made him froze in place as if he had been under a restraining spell. Although this step is outside of my plan, even if it dies, the Colosseum maintained by the energy in its body can still last for 5 minutes. Nightmare took another step, and light black energy spread from the soles of her feet. I could only hear the sound of broken mirrors coming from all around. This extremely solid mirror world was shattered by the impact of his energy. Fang Xin's face turned pale, and his expression changed drastically. The mirror world that was arranged in a hurry is not stable enough. She suddenly raised her head and looked into the distance. The sky above the entire school is still wrapped in the black energy of the Colosseum. These 5 minutes are enough for me to crush all of you ants to death. Between whispers, Nightmare had already appeared 2 meters away from Shu Yi. A mere useless human from the rock realm can actually cut off my arm. He took a step forward, thrust out his right palm like lightning, and grabbed Shu Yi, who was motionless in place. Boom! A red light quickly passed through and exploded in Night Dyer's palm. All the air waves from the explosion rushed in its direction, causing its entire body to be filled with smoke and dust. Fang Xin staggered, got up from the ground, endured the pain in his body, gritted his teeth and walked towards this side. I'm still here, how can I let you attack other people? At the same time, the sound of the explosion and the airwaves finally brought Shu Yi back to his consciousness. When he noticed Fang Xin's movements, his face immediately changed slightly and he shouted urgently, "Don't come over, get away quickly." Boom! A ball of black light rushed out from the smoke and dust of the explosion, hitting Fang Xin instantly. Fang Xin was hit by the black light without any resistance, and his body hit the outer wall of the school heavily. The concussive impact caused her to vomit blood again. Her body slid softly from the wall, and she couldn't stand up for a while. The strong wind blew away the smoke and dust, and Nightmare's ability to face Fang Xin was actually unscathed. He was not in a hurry to kill Fang Xin, his eyes only stayed on Shu Yi, with anger flashing in his eyes. My perfect plan was ruined by you, a kid from the stone realm. I want you to die. He flipped his palm and clapped it out, his palm wrapped in energy. In his opinion, this attack was enough to turn Shu Yi into powder. But at this moment, a wisp of bloody smell suddenly drifted into his nose. Shu Yi's palm actually clasped his wrist firmly, stopping his attack in the air. At this moment, his beard and hair seemed to have exploded, and the blood all over his body was evaporating rapidly as if it were boiling. The blood-colored mist enveloped his body, and his speed and strength seemed to have received some kind of blessing, and he was able to block the Night Dyer's attack out of thin air. A perfect plan, Shu Yi whispered. His voice was extremely dull, as if he was under some great pressure, but there was a hint of ridicule in his eyes. Are you referring to your plan that is full of loopholes, without any backup plan, and as simple as a kindergarten kid's plan? His taunting immediately angered Night Dyer. A layer of energy instantly surged on the latter's wrist, shaking Shu Yi's palm away, and the anger in his eyes almost turned into substance. But even so, he still sneered and said in a low voice, "Then you dare to talk to me like this and rely on your ability, blood boiling. If I remember correctly, this ability is the weakest D-level ability in your human-level determination. With all due respect, this ability to burn one's own blood in exchange for speed and strength, in my opinion, is simply too weak to be vulnerable." Shu Yi suddenly smiled relaxedly, his hair fell down again, and the blood in his body stopped burning. "You know, I have always felt that I have pretty good luck." He clenched his fists, feeling that he had gained new abilities by killing the wolf, and took a deep breath. "I hope your luck will allow you to survive my next attack." Night Dyer sneered and looked at Shu Yi condescendingly. Shu Yi looked directly at him and closed his eyes gently. In the palm of his hand, a red light quickly spread throughout his body. Half a second later, he opened his eyes and raised the corners of his mouth. It seems that the card drawn this time. It's Xiao Wang, just after Shu Yi killed Gang Lang. The third special effects wizard of natural selection was successfully activated, allowing him to realize a new D-level ability on the spot, boiling blood. The effect of this ability is very simple. It is to burn one's own blood in exchange for several times the speed and strength. Among D-level abilities, it is an extremely rare ability that can be used in combat. But it is also one of the few D-level abilities that has serious side effects. According to calculations from the national database, a normal person can maintain a boiling blood state for up to 3 minutes. Once this time is exceeded, anemia will occur quickly. If the ability is not released in time, there is even a risk of death from lack of blood. At this moment, facing the terrifying pressure of the Night Dyer, Shu also activated the second special effect fading that could be used again because Wizard was triggered. This time, the object he is acting on is this brand new ability, blood boiling. The effect of Fofan is to randomly upgrade the ability to any level from C level to SSS level. And after one use, the effect will disappear. Shu also boasted that he was lucky. And at this crucial moment when the situation was urgent, his luck did not let him down. Although there is no random to the most powerful SSS level upgrade. But the boiling blood at this moment has also undergone earth-shaking changes. SS level, boiling blood. Special effect 1. Boiling, the blood burned by boiling blood can increase the body's ability 5 times. Special effect 2. Blood mask, use 5% of your own blood to condense a blood mask to gain an explosive attack. 2 special effects caused by the increased ability level of boiling blood flashed through his mind quickly. The corners of Shu Yi's mouth raised slightly, and his eyes looked at Night Dyer very calmly. He now has the ability to fight this virtual demon. Shu Yi's expression immediately made the anger in Nightmare's eyes even more intense. It was difficult for him to understand how a mere kid from the Stone Realm had the right to speak like this in front of him. Death. A cold light flashed in his eyes, and his right fist, packed with energy, slammed into Shu Yi's face. Boom. In the imagination, the picture of the human head being opened and the flower in front of me did not appear. His fist was caught in the air by Shu Yi plainly. At this moment, Shu Yi's hair and beard were standing straight again, and his blood was boiling. The blood mist that rose up due to the rapid boiling filled the surroundings of him, turning into pieces of blood vapor that continued to float into the air. I said it. Shu Yi's voice was extremely low, with indifference in his eyes. My luck is really good. His right fist flew out so fast that it even produced a sonic boom. Nightmare's chest was hit by this punch, and her whole body flew backwards like a cannonball. The terrifying impact shook away the energy covering his body, and the shock covered his whole body. Boom. Night Dyer was smashed into the wall at the edge of the school, directly blasting through the solid wall. Her body hit the black barrier of the Colosseum, and was then directly ejected to the ground. Reluctantly using his energy to suppress the roiling blood and energy in his body, Nightmare had just gotten up when a bloody light came from afar and appeared in front of him in an instant. Now tell me, who is the man trapped in the Colosseum? Shu Yi spoke in a low voice and stepped hard on Night Dyer's body with his right foot. Nightmare's whole body was shaken, and he controlled the energy vigorously, rolling his body to one side. Boom! Shu Yi stepped on the ground with his right foot. The hard ground cracked instantly, and a spider web-like crack appeared. The power of shock continued to spread, bouncing Night Dyer's body up. He tried his best to maintain the balance of his body and stumbled backwards, his eyes flashing with disbelief. How is this possible? A mere D-level ability can actually unleash such power. A sense of absurdity spread in his heart. If his cultivation hadn't restricted him, he might have yelled loudly at this moment, "Can this F-King thing be a D-level ability?" But Shu didn't give him time to react. The time that boiling blood can be maintained is only 3 minutes at most. He didn't dare to remove the ability at all. After all, once lifted, boiling blood, who was promoted to SS level by Tuifan, will become D level again. He put his feet on the ground, rushed towards the direction where Night Dyer was dodging, and swung his right fist out. But at this moment, the scene in front of him suddenly changed. The person in front of him turned into Fang Xin, who was leaning against the wall and looking frightened. She looked at him in disbelief. "Shu Yi, what are you doing?" Boom! Shu Yi's fist hit Fang Xin accurately on the face without any pause. Fang Xin's face was distorted, and while his body flew upside down, he changed back into the appearance of a Night Dyer. His face was extremely vicious after being beaten, and his eyes flashed with shock and disbelief. "Why didn't you hesitate at all?" His ability is called Mirage, which is a mental affecting A-level ability. Once the ability is turned on, it can be confused with reality and create extremely realistic illusions. Even someone as strong as Cao Sha would hesitate for a moment under the influence of his ability. But Shu Yi's attack didn't pause at all, as if he really wanted to penetrate Fang Xin. The human brain is very sophisticated. Shu Yi landed smoothly, and the load on his body made him frown slightly. While adjusting his breath, he headed in the direction of Night Dyer. As long as you carry out reasonable training, you can even have abilities comparable to those of a computer. In my brain, I have extremely detailed modeling of all the scenes around me. How could a sudden hallucination like yours affect me? Even if I close my eyes, I will never miss it. In a quick whisper, Shu Yi had already caught up with Night Dyer, who flew upside down and landed on the ground. At this moment, he was like an evil ghost, his whole face turned slightly ferocious due to the pain of his blood boiling. This face fell into the eyes of Nightmare, and the virtual demon actually felt a penetrating terror. The sense of crisis of death enveloped his heart for the first time. "This punch will send you home to the west." Shu didn't hesitate and landed a heavy punch. But the moment he punched, the Night Dyer in front of him actually changed again. Shu Yi was in a trance for a while, and suddenly a girl in a white dress with only half her body left, but still managed to squeeze out a smile, appeared. "Shu Yi, look, the way I looked just now, did I look like a hunter? You shouldn't become her." Shu Yi's eyes instantly ignited with anger, and blazing blood flames burst out from his right fist. His explosive punch hit the ground, and the ground instantly sunk by 3 points, and a deep pit with a radius of 3 meters suddenly appeared. "And you shouldn't have hesitated for that moment." The sound of Night Dyer's laughter sounded from one side, full of madness. Shu Yi suddenly turned his head and saw Nightmare taking advantage of this moment to dodge into the distance. At this moment, Nightmare's eyes flashed with malice, and he whispered slightly crazily, "If I hadn't been seriously injured and had one of my arms cut off, how could you, a kid from the Stone Realm, have pushed me to this point?" Even though his ability does not belong to the frontal combat type, he is still a mountain-level existence. If he hadn't been injured and had a lot of energy consumed by Cao Sha before, he wouldn't have been forced to this point anyway. "I am the younger brother of the 10th Emperor, how could I be stopped by a mere human brat?" The energy in his left palm gathered together, and a black energy ball was formed, which he threw directly behind him. The energy ball flew rapidly and hit the distant floor in an instant. The building exploded after being hit, and huge rocks half a story high quickly slid down and fell towards the ground. Shu Yi's face changed slightly and he quickly raised his head to look in that direction. If he remembered correctly, that was where Wang Peng and the others were. More than 20 students gathered there. "If you are hit by that stone, you will definitely die. You weak and stupid humans." Night Dyer laughed crazily. "You choose to save them, or continue to fight me." Anger flashed in Shu Yi's eyes, and without saying a word, he he directly stepped on the ground and rushed towards the direction where the rocks fell. There was a cold flash in Nightmare's eyes, and a sneer on her lips. The boring guardianship is exactly the starting point of the stupidity of you humans. Without saying a word, he immediately started moving in the opposite direction. No matter what, I must first devour some humans to restore energy and injuries. But not long before he rushed out, there was a strange movement behind him. At this moment, not only Nightmare, but even Shu, who rushed out more than 10 meters, stopped. Several thick vines rose from the ground and supported under the stone. The falling force of the stone was greatly weakened, but it soon broke through the vines and continued to fall. At the same time, several forces rushed in from all directions, with various strong or weak and strange abilities rushing towards the rocks. In a moment, the huge stones and countless fallen bricks were all shattered by energy and scattered all over the ground. Dozens of figures slowly emerged from the smoke. Then the smoke dissipated, and nearly 100 students and teachers appeared in Shu Yi's eyes. The leaders were surprisingly the desperate teacher from the Awakened Academy who was huddled next to the barrier earlier, and his classmate Wang Peng. At this moment, the despair in the teacher's eyes no longer existed. Although he was still full of fear, he shouted loudly, "I have gathered everyone in the school together. If you fall, no matter how we run away, it will be useless. Just give it a try, you don't need to worry about us, we can protect ourselves." Behind him, familiar classmates and teachers gathered together, all looking nervously towards the playground. Although they were far apart, they could still sense the energy fluctuations and surging energy and blood on Shu Mo and Shu Yi. Wang Peng mustered up the courage, ran forward 2 steps with all his strength, raised his hands in the shape of a trumpet and shouted, "Brother Yi, beat this virtual demon to death. If it were you, it would definitely be possible." His eyes were full of trust, and he shouted desperately as if he knew no fear. Damn human beings. Night Dire's expression changed dramatically, and her body suddenly froze as she turned to leave. His original plan was to defeat the students scattered around the school one by one and devour them one by one to restore their injuries and energy. But what he didn't expect was that this group of humans who only knew how to run away in times of crisis would have the courage to gather together again. They seemed to place all their hopes on Shu Yi and Fang Xin, believing that they could defeat Ganglang and themselves. Shu Yi stared blankly at the nearly 100 figures gathered together, but the corners of his mouth raised slightly. The next moment, he turned around suddenly and said as if talking to himself, "Maybe this is what a fool like you wants to protect." He raised his eyes slightly and looked at Nightmare. The blood boiling and burning in his body was approaching its limit and was about to approach the 3-minute limit. "This time, I will never miss it." He stepped on the ground hard, and as the ground cracked, his whole body was like a blazing fire, approaching the Night Dire almost instantly. 2 punches were thrown out in succession. Even though Night Dire had gathered energy in time to defend, he was still beaten back. His chest rolled, blood spurted out from the air, energy trembled, and madness appeared in his eyes. "How could I be blocked by you here? I want to prove to my brother that I am not just the younger brother of the 10 emperors, I am also a virtual demon who can stand alone." In his mind, the faces of the virtual demons who flattered him on the surface but looked down on him secretly flashed through his mind again. And the brother's slightly disappointed eyes and cold words. "With your little strength, what's the difference between opening the virtual realm and entering the Dragon Kingdom and seeking death? Don't waste my time here. If you are free, go and hone your abilities. You are my younger brother. Don't always think about these childish things and bring shame to the title of 10 emperors." Nightmare roared and stopped retreating, waving his one arm towards Shu Yi. "I am the only winner, I will never lose." At this moment, the black gem between his eyebrows burst out with dazzling light, and the energy intensity of his entire body increased by a few points. Shu also punched him, his eyes were cold, and he roared angrily, "That guy Fang Xin almost risked his life to protect the group of people behind him. How could I let you attack them?" At this moment, the blood on his body evaporated instantly, and the blood mist floating in the air quickly turned into a bloody mask, covering his face. The moment the bloody face appeared, the speed of his right fist surged, almost turning into an afterimage, and he rushed towards the Night Dire. Click! Above the sky, the extremely solid Colosseum suddenly shattered at this moment. 3 figures rushed out from one side, and they were Cao Sha and the other 3 who were speeding up. Cao Sha held the blue long sword in his hand and maintained the slashing motion. He looked forward anxiously, but suddenly froze. Fierce bloody flames soared into the sky. On the playground, which was already in a state of embarrassment, Shuyi and Night Dyer fisted each other, but his fist hit Night Dyer first, passing through his chest and creating a bloody hole. Nightmare's face twitched, looking ahead in disbelief, and murmured, "Brother, elder." Shuyi's face was solemn, and the mask on his face shattered suddenly, turning into a blood mist and scattering behind him. Night Dyer's fist was frozen in front of him, unable to take another step forward. The next moment, his entire body exploded and turned into a blood mist, and he was knocked to the ground by Shuyi. "Hey," Cao Sha murmured and looked forward, the blue shadow in his hand turning into light and dissipating. "I remember Fang Xin once said that guy's ability is AD level ability, right?" At this moment, not only him, but also Guo Yan and Sha Li behind him were in a daze, looking ahead in disbelief. The three of them swallowed together, but the same words flashed in their minds. "Is this AD level ability? You call this AD level ability?" The pure white ceiling caught Shuyi's eyes. He stared silently at the ceiling for about 3 seconds to adjust to the light, and then sat up. "Hey, Shuyi, you're awake." Guo Yan, who had been sitting next to Shuyi's bed, noticed his movements and immediately put down his phone, showing a look of surprise. His voice was loud, and after a few seconds, Cao Sha walked in from the door. "Hey, wake up." Shuyi looked around, then looked at the two of them. "What's the date today?" Guo Yan looked serious and said in a heavy tone, "It's August now, and you have been in a coma for 2 months. This joke is not funny at all," Shuyi said without hesitation. He reached out and picked up Guo Yan's phone and looked down. "I was unconscious for 3 whole days. I thought the first thing you said when you woke up was to ask, 'Where is this place?'" Cao Sha sat directly on the chair next to the bed and said with a smile, "Isn't this a hospital?" Shuyi raised his left hand and connected the infusion tube on the back of his hand. Judging from the bed and equipment, it shouldn't be difficult to identify this. There is a billboard for the trade building outside the window. This should be the central hospital in the west of the city. And the reason why I appear here is probably due to excessive blood loss. What about the reaction time? Cao Sha turned to look at Guo Yan and asked with a smile. 42 seconds. Guo Yan looked at the watch he used to keep time, his eyes filled with wonder. Did you see that it took only 42 seconds to determine the time, place and current situation when I was unconscious? Cao Sha said with approval. This speed of observation and judgment cannot be overstated with the word genius. Having such quick observation and judgment in battle is enough to anticipate the enemy's opportunities and gain an advantage. He smiled and patted Guo Yan's shoulder, then turned to look at Shuyi. "You killed a virtual demon in the mountain realm and a virtual beast in the rock realm. Besides this, all 110 students in the entire number 3 middle school were saved by you. All these achievements will be recorded on your head. The government will also reward you with sufficient benefits in accordance with the regulations of hunters." Shuyi's expression did not change. He just thought for a second and then responded, "Can you just give me the reward? If I have any merit, I can just record it on your heads. I don't want to be too ostentatious and cause unnecessary trouble." "Are you sure?" Although Cao Sha had expected this, he still asked with a faint smile, "Do you know that this achievement is extremely prominent among the Void Hunters? With such achievements, even if you join Longxia Academy, you can become the number 1 among the freshmen. Others will respect you as well. It's just a boring name." Shuyi pulled out the needle on the back of his hand and sat cross-legged on the bed, silently sensing the current condition of his body. "Where's Fang Xin?" He suddenly thought of Fang Xin, who was beaten unconscious by Nightmare in the battle, and asked. "Don't worry, I'm fine." Suddenly, a vague voice sounded from the door. Shuyi looked up, his expression suddenly became weird. "I saw an extremely bloated mummy limping in with Sha Li's support. Have you awakened your bloodline and changed your profession to a mummy?" Shuyi strained his face to prevent himself from laughing out loud. "Stop talking nonsense." Fang Xin, with only one eye exposed, mumbled, his voice extremely dull, "That's a virtual demon from the mountain realm. It's not easy to survive. Her injuries are too serious, so emergency treatment can only be carried out in this way." Sha Li's expression was still extremely cold. But Shu Yi saw that the corners of her mouth were constantly twitching at a very subtle angle. It seems that everyone is here. Cao Sha looked back at Fang Xin, who walked in, and suddenly stood up from his chair. Guo Yan on the side also stood up immediately. Fang Xin was supported by Sha Li and came to the two of them. The four of them lined up, their expressions suddenly became serious. Salute, Cao Sha shouted, and the four of them immediately looked solemn, placed their right fists on their left chests, and stood still with their chests raised. Shu Yi, in the name of the captain of the 5th hunting team, I would like to thank you. The four of them bent down hard, without caring about their identities at all, and just saluted Shu Yi. Although Fang Xin was a little clumsy and a little slow, he bowed to Shu Yi and thanked him. This time virtual demons and virtual beasts will appear on campus, which is a major dereliction of duty on my part. Cao Sha spoke calmly, with a hint of guilt in his voice. If you hadn't risked your life to stop me, there would have been heavy casualties. Your actions made up for our mistakes and saved 110 lives. Thank you very much. His voice was extremely solemn, his expression was extremely sincere, and his tone was extremely sincere. However, the scene that should have made Shu Yi extremely moved in Cao Sha's imagination did not appear. After seeing the actions of several people, Shu Yi shrank directly to the other side of the bed as if he had seen something unclean, showing an extremely disgusted expression. Do you hunters of voids all like to play awkward games? Ha 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 ha. Fang Xin laughed in the, Mummy, Senior, I told you a long time ago that this guy won't like this. Cao Sha raised his body awkwardly and twitched the corners of his mouth. The atmosphere that was originally brewing suddenly disappeared amidst Fang Xin's laughter. He rubbed his brows helplessly and muttered to himself, obviously this is how it is shown on TV. 4 pairs of strange eyes fell on him, causing him to cough quickly and look at Shu Yi seriously. We have dealt with the aftermath of this incident. Those students who witnessed the situation at that time would only conclude that Shu Mo and Fang Xin fought until they were seriously injured and they happened to be killed by you. They would not cause you unnecessary trouble. Although I am very curious about your situation, there is an urgent contact from the college, and we must rush back as soon as possible. He took out a broken sword from his arms. It was Ji Yu Xiao who had not had time to recover it at that time, and the scabbard that was chopped into 2 halves. This is your thing, and I have recycled it for you. As for your reward, a dedicated person will contact you later and distribute it to you. Besides, after placing everything on the table next to the bed, Cao Sha's expression became serious again. He took out a simple jade pendant from his pocket and threw it to Shu Yi. I heard Fang Xin tell you something. I also know that you had some prejudice against hunters. I don't expect you to reverse this bias anytime soon. But I still hope that you can use your own eyes to see with your own eyes what kind of person a hunter is. After throwing out the jade pendant, he turned around and left with the other 3 people. When he reached the door of the ward, he turned his head slightly, showed a side face, and smiled slightly, if that's okay. I hope to see you at the entrance ceremony. Thanks for watching, please like and subscribe.